Hello everyone, this is update for October 25, 2022, day 244 of the war and of the date update. So a little bit of strategy, so it's going to be a mix of all things today. But we will start with this general strategic developments, and let's actually start with Ukraine. So actually, I forgot yesterday to mention that the former head of Ukrainian central bank, which stepped down just on October 4th. Um, he left the country and now is being, let's say, uh, searched, or there's say search warrant for him issued by Ukrainian anti-corruption bureau. So just as I mentioned before, for embezzlement of the funds or something. Uh, as I said before, at that time, that this is basically uh, the parliament, central bank, all of this group, they essentially work as a one system, and it's just not about personalities. It doesn't matter who comes there; they will continue um, doing the same things of basically stealing public funds and then you know leaving. I think in his case he went to Greece to start his own, where he's doing his own real estate development business. So this is not exception. This is norm. There is a new one, head of central bank in Ukraine, who is totally in the pocket of Andrei Yermak, for those who are regular viewers probably remember, I discussed this person in at the beginning of July. I think July 9. There was the video, and then there was a couple follow-up videos. So basically, there is strong allegation and strong indirect evidence that he is working for Russia. The reason I don't have a proof, nobody has a proof, but if you kind of like look at all of those indirect evidence combined, it's very clear where everything goes there. And then so basically you have a revolving door in Ukrainian government where people steal and then they go west. Similar in some ways, it is very similar to Afghanistan, where the president basically was embezzling funds, and you know there was corruption was rampant, and then the country fell apart because of that, right? So it was rotten from within, and nobody wanted to defend it. The only difference in Ukrainian case is there is, among the population, among the citizens, they won't defend the country. They not really defending, the government that's elected in Ukraine in many ways. Um, so then what happens as a result of all of this, the economy is essentially dead. It was, it's a difficult situation, but there could have been things done that allowed people at least to sort of take destiny in their own hands, and there will be enough people who would figure out how to be successful even in this extremely difficult circumstances. Instead of that, Ukrainian government basically was carrying out Marxist policies in Ukraine, before the war, but especially since the beginning of the war. If you listen, I was very critical about many economic actions. So as a result, you have a double whammy for the Ukrainian economy. Uh, Ukrainian government itself is the most dangerous one, and then also Russian attacks. And so you have that economy. As a result, Ukrainian president goes west and says, "Oh, please give us 38 billion US dollars just for our state budget for 2023." Just for the reference, a Ukrainian state budget before the war usually was about 45 billion, maybe 46, something like that. So you can see that the economy is essentially completely wiped out, right? So there is almost nothing left sort of alive in the country. And then he also asked for additional 17 billion for reconstruction and so on, which Ukraine definitely needs, money for reconstruction. Mm, However, the problem is money giving in the hands of this kind of people. Uh, Probably most of them will end up on the bank accounts in somewhere in Switzerland, something along those lines. At least half of those money. So that's a biggest actually problem in terms of um, how to help Ukraine and not to enrich people that should not be sort of enriched. That's the biggest challenge, really. Um, how to how to accomplish that. The However, the real solution to Ukrainian problem is actually um, internal investors. There if you sort of like free up economy from all of the red tape that's which is Ukraine has plenty of it. Um, there will be enough of internal investors who will invest and rebuild Ukraine. Mm, but that system doesn't it's not this approach is not sort of doesn't work for the current political sort of class that runs Ukraine, because then they cannot enrich themselves, without doing anything. So that's why there's this search for external resources, because then they can steal from those resources. So it's just very simple, primitive motivation among those people. Now let's switch a little bit to Russia and see what's going on there. So in Russia, for those who are curious, like what ordinary Russian citizens do in terms of how they save money or how they preserve their savings, because buying US dollars or euros is not that easy these days in Russia. So what they do, they actually buy gold bars. So effectively these gold bars, they're easy. Russia mines and produces a lot of gold, so they're readily available. So people buying those gold bars, to the point that actually, even though Russia actually mines a lot of gold, and I discussed this probably like 2 weeks ago, that Russian gold miners were asking sort of government, please buy gold from us, because right now sanctions and it's hard to sell outside. So there's plenty of gold, which is very interesting. But there is at the same time there are shortages of gold bars, so the ordinary people have hard time getting those. So this is kind of like situation on the personal sort of level in Russia. Then in terms of logistics, so if you remember, there is a Crimean bridge which is down here that connects Crimea, which is this peninsula, which is Ukrainian territory, with the Russian territory here, with Krasnodarsky Krai. That's the name of it, which is, by the way, is um, essentially like, well, not essentially completely, but there is ethnic Ukrainian majority there, because it was populated by Ukrainians. Even though there was quite a bit of genocide there, but there's still significant, maybe not large majority, but sort of close to 50% of ethnic Ukrainians there. But this is just for education purposes. The So the problem was Crimean Peninsula. What happened is, if you remember that essentially the bridge is no longer usable, neither railroad, no road, right? So you can use it you can travel by car, but not semi-trailer trucks, right? And no, commodity railroad carriages that carry commodities. So so essentially right now there are problems in Crimea, because there is not enough supply of everything that comes to Crimea, because the bridge is essentially blocked, and you only have ferries which are tiny throughput, so it's not enough what you need. So just there was basically example when there are like 1,000 semi-trailer trucks parked on the other side of the bridge, not literally on the other side, because there are a bunch of those parking lots in the whole, like, like 20-30 kilometers area around it, but it's a huge uh, traffic jam of those trucks that cannot get to Crimea, and basically because they try to use ferries, and as I said before, ferries are never replacements for the bridge, not even close. And Russian side is apparently very hesitant to use this land bridge. So effectively, this land bridge is kind of like not really working because there is a lot of activity by Ukrainian guerrilla groups, I guess you can call it that way. Guerrilla in this, or partisan groups, or partisan, how how they used to be called by Germans in the former Soviet Union. Uh, those are, I wouldn't say they are just locals. There is a lot of sort of organized special forces groups, but they kind of, the way it works is actually they work, so the core group, let's say, goes into the territory, and they use the locals to carry out whatever they need to do, right? So then they kind of like grow, like they increase in size, right? By basically incorporating locals who sort of supportive and so on, and so it kind of like works as a one system basically, and so it's not safe simply to use this land bridge, so essentially it doesn't work. What this also means that it's not, that supply to Kherson bridgehead is also kind of like under sort of under question. I'm not saying there is no supply. There is some bare minimum being supplied. There's no question about it, but it's difficult. Let's put it this way. Then let's actually switch to Europe. The new prime minister of Italy, which is, I believe, is there from like more like on the from the right side of the political spectrum. Even I said before that that right left is totally artificial divide, but uh, so she actually came out and strongly supported Ukraine, despite the sort of hopes on the Russian side that they will be sort of more pro-Russian. So they clearly confirmed that they are in favor of supporting Ukraine at this point. Then what? So there is also news that I discussed yesterday. There's continuation of that news about the progressives in the U.S., which is the far left wing of the Democratic Party, and they recalled their petition to the U.S. president, to start sort of to push for peace negotiation, which is code word for force Ukraine to kind of like accept, status quo, and just let's just end this war. Doesn't matter what's going to happen. So this is obviously a very short-sighted view. I'm not going to even discuss it. That's not going to solve the war. It's just going to means that the war will blow up in a year or two in much larger, again, in the same way. This is because for Russia, Russia needs entire Ukraine. So it's with Ukraine, Russia can become major player. Without Ukraine, it's very difficult to do so. So it's like it's a key component. Let's put it this way. Um, and they obviously don't understand that. But what I'm trying to say is this whole sort of request. So I guess I don't know how you call it, from far right and far left, were just sort of probing attacks. They're much stronger attack. They will all come back. There will be much stronger attack down the road, probably probably in January or February, where there will be really strong push to sort of to force Ukraine to sort of accept to whatever the terms are and sort of close the deal. So this is gonna only escalate down the road because for say majority of the population, they strongly associate inflation or let's say decline in living standards they associate with the war. Then, as I mentioned before, they don't really look deeper about what's really causing these problems at a much deeper level. And so this is kind of like a knee-jerk reaction. Let's just stop this and in hope that things will return to normal, which they want. Um, so hopefully that's on that. And then also in terms of Russian attacks on Ukrainian energy infrastructure, it was relatively quiet day. uh, Ukrainian energy distribution system still alive, living on band-aids. For how long it will be able to survive, nobody knows. Especially the testing time will be winter. By winter, I mean when the temperature will become negative, or so, and that's usually happens in Ukraine more like in January than in December. I mean, could be if it's early winter, that could happen too. Then there is this conversation about continuation of conversation about this dirty atomic bomb that Ukraine allegedly um, trying to make and do something with it. So in terms of, I just want to straighten out about capabilities. So Ukraine, yes, has capabilities to make that, and it actually has capabilities to make sort of real nuclear bomb. Uh, Ukraine has deposit of uranium, which is in this kind of area over here. Then it has technical capabilities which are in Kharkiv to kind of put everything together, and then Ukraine has the rocket manufacturing capabilities in Dnipro. So all of this, it was used to be part of the Soviet Union sort of nuclear manufacturing complex. So and it remained, and there are capabilities. They not being sort of used, and Ukraine is not really seeking any of that, right? So there is really no point for Ukraine to use this dirty nuclear bomb by any means. For the no incentive, right? Because it's its own territory. It's just really, nobody want to do it for obvious reasons. Uh, at the same time, from the Russian perspective, let's just look from the Russian perspective. mm, when they have incentive to do that, right? In which case, so if Russia is, actively moving, sort of taking territories in Ukraine, and in general they want to take over Ukraine, they don't want to do that, right? There's no incentive for Russia to do this dirty nuclear bomb. The only incentive for Russia to actually do this dirty nuclear bomb is if they decide that they're gonna withdraw from Ukraine completely, or they losing the war. Because in that case, if they do bunch of them, right, and as I said, we don't know what isotopes they can use, or you can sort of basically, it's like a I guess Lego constructor. You can make it the way you need, sort of custom design, basically for your needs. But let's say if they sort of retreating and they on defensive, and they feel like they're gonna lose the war, there is incentive for the Russian side to do that, because the logic is very sort of simple. Let's just blow out a bunch of those, uh, like sort of kind of like from north to south of Ukraine, and you kind of create natural sort of barrier for the advances of, let's say, Ukrainian troops, and or which Russia fears more of the NATO forces, of the Western forces, right? So basically, this is kind of like logic. Okay, if we cannot capture Ukraine, let's just destroy it. Let's just create a no man's land, and it creates natural sort of like barrier between the West and Russia, essentially, right? So the one another nature sort of barrier is Belarus, right? So that's up north. It's fully controlled by Russia, and since Russia cannot control Ukraine, so why don't we just do that kind of thing, right? So that's the only situation when there is a strong incentive for Russia to do so. Especially this probably puts more sort of how to say, not credibility, but more incentive for Russia to do so, because I mentioned before a little bit that 101st, I think, Airborne U.S. Airborne Division, or I think the second brigade of it, was deployed for the first time to Romania, and then there were statements made by the, I think, former CIA director saying that the West can get involved with the troops into the in the war in Ukraine, right? And then I think it was even uh, not statements, but something off the cuff remarks by the commander of this 101st Airborne Division, saying like, "Yeah, we can, we can go there." So that sort of makes that case for Russia much stronger, even then. There was official U.S. officials that came out, said like, no, we're never going to get involved in terms of like actual U.S. troops or whatever, or German troops or UK troops. So that's not going to happen. But this obviously makes Russian side extremely like sort of cautious and thinking like, yep, this is going to happen. We need to create this barrier, right? So that's very simple logic in this case. Now let's switch to um, walk through the front line. Let's start from the north as we always do, and then we're gonna move in clockwise fashion. So the uh, artillery fire exchanges along the state border are uh, fairly low. So it's not totally quiet, but it's much quieter this today. Now let's move to North Lugansk front line, and let's see what's happening there. So Ukrainian troops continue, I guess continue their attacks from yesterday. This looks more like a probing attacks. So they're putting pressure. This today was the day that Ukrainian troops attempted to liberate village Kuzemivka here. They were not successful. So Russian sources report that Ukrainian side is accumulating resources here to sort of renew uh, the offensive here. And there's other evidence of that happening. Let's actually move to North Donbass front line, and I'll explain why. So there was very strong Ukrainian attack today towards Novo Verkhnekamensk, really with the goal Zolotarivka, right? So uh, which put Russian forces in very difficult situation. Um, it, Based on preliminary information, it was contained, so there was no really breach. But if you go back and kind of like really look at this whole situation, this whole area is essentially kind of like a one piece, so you can even call it one front line because it's all very interconnected. The idea is sort of twofold: is one to attack and kind of move from the north to south, and then the other one is to kind of like go straight east and liberate Lysychansk and essentially liberate this whole area, and as a result liberate this whole um, North Lugansk like area. So this is kind of like, that's why I'm saying there are more and more indications that Ukrainian side is preparing to sort of make decisive moves in this whole area. The whole sort of plan is somewhat unclear at this point, but the big picture you understand. And then that's why, if you remember, I mentioned about that Wagner line that was being built by the Wagner mercenaries, basically straight south of Seversky Donetsk, because they also understand that this is open flank, and if Ukrainian troops sort of clear out this territory, they move south, they totally this whole thing is gonna collapse, and it'll be total panic retreat towards Russia, towards Rostov, right? Or if Russian troops will not do that, they can be encircled. So this could be an extremely potentially dangerous move. for the Russian side. So that's why they were building this defensive line. There are many reports that it's not finished, it's just patchy and so on. But it's not about whether it's finished or not. It's more like, okay, Russian command realizes the problem. Whether they do right things or not do right things, that's another question. But it's very obvious and clear to both sides that this is a tremendous opportunity for Ukrainian side and a tremendous threat for the Russian side here. So now let's just look a little bit more south. So as always, the same situation, Wagner mercenaries trying to attack. As you can see, they were pretty active everywhere on this whole front line, and they continue trying to advance south of Bakhmut and sort of north to basically to squeeze out Ukrainian troops from there. But so far they were not successful today. Now let's check what's going on central Donbass front line, basically west of Donetsk. Things here are more or less the same from the Russian perspective, just continuing attacks towards the Smarinka, out of Pisky salient and Strait of Divka. However, there is a difference. Ukrainian troops try to counter-attack. This is more like a tactical local attack. So what this really kind of tells us is that Russian troops are penetrating far enough that they starting to really splitting the defensive line of Ukrainian troops into like two islands here and here, which essentially creates a problem for sort of coherence of defensive system. So it may sort of fall apart and create opportunity for Russian side. So as a result, Ukrainian troops are counter-attacking to sort of recapture the lost territories to regain coherence of the defensive line as a whole. So which, as you understand, it means that situation is a little bit sort of uncomfortable for Ukrainian side. And that's the point of those counterattacks there. And in terms of like where the sort of outcome of that attack, it didn't go to anywhere. Just basically failed counterattack. Now let's see what's going on Zaporizhya front line. Things here are quiet as they always are. By quiet, I mean there is no active offensive, defensive actions there. Let's finish with Kherson bridgehead. Things here are also fairly quiet. Ukrainian side is focused on disrupting the supply lines and so on. At the same time, that there were sort of indication that Russian troops might be withdrawing. It doesn't seem that this is really materializing. It looks like they, let's say, they will not leave without the fight. Basically, if there is no push, then they'll try to stay. If there is enough strong enough, then they will leave. So basically, that's this kind of situation. At the same time, as I said many times, this is going to be lost by the Russian side unless something super unusual happens. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, and until tomorrow.